Welcome to America's Top Rebbetzins. In the merit of this class, may Hashem protect all the Jews across the world and especially the soldiers of the IDF, including Yosef Aaron ben Chava Kela, Yuval Baruch ben Dina Batsheva, Yehuda ben Rivka Revital, and Yehuda Eliezer ben Geula Ahuva. Please click on the subscribe button to subscribe to us on the America's Top Rebbetzins YouTube page, or click follow to follow us on your podcasting app so that you are the first to know when an inspiring new episode is posted. I am happy to have on today's show Rebbetzin Tali Wohlgelernter. Rebbetzin Tali and her husband Tzvi Wohlgelernter spent 3 years as a rabbinic couple at Rutgers University in New Jersey before returning to Israel, where they are currently the directors of Mizrachi OU JLIC in Givat, Shmuel, and Bar Ilan. Thank you so much for joining us. Please tell us more about yourself and what you do.
Thank you for having me. I'm impressed with how you pronounce our last name, first and foremost. That's not easy. As you mentioned, my husband and I are the directors here of the JLIC program in Givat, Shmuel, and Bar Ilan, which essentially means that we are providing support for the entire Anglo community here in Givat, Shmuel, and students in Bar Ilan. The JLIC program, as it's known in the United States, is to provide support for Orthodox students on secular college campuses, which is confusing to people. What do you need that in Israel for? And so what the OU brilliantly noticed is that the purpose of having couples on campus is to provide support for day school graduates to maintain the values that they were instilled with until that point in their lives. And it's becoming a trend and an increasing trend that those day school graduates are choosing to come and study and do their university here in Israel. And those students still need a similar support and network. And so by having a couple like myself and my husband on our campus or other campuses throughout Israel, what JLIC is doing is providing a network of support for these day school graduates who have grown up in this beautiful, insulated environment to kind of have that feeling of home and that feeling of family. And so that's what we're doing here. We're really providing support in all those different ways.
That's beautiful. I love that. And so it's so interesting. So you're seeing an increase of students from America who are going to school in Israel?
Yes, significant increase. I was in seminary, scary to admit, about 15 years ago. And I remember when I was here, it was very unheard of for someone to choose to stay in Israel to do college. Even those of us who our plan was to make Aliyah, the trajectory usually was finish seminary, go back to the United States or your home country, finish school, and then come back to Israel. Because it was almost prohibitive to do it here from a language standpoint, from a community standpoint, an infrastructure standpoint. And now with the evolution of JLIC being here, but even a little bit prior to that, students are really seeing that this is a viable option for them to study here in Israel. And with more degrees being available in English, with community support that they feel that they're really cared for, that they have Shabbos meals and friends and social events and learning events all catered to their background and also kind of the goals that they have for their life, they find it a viable option to stay here. And we're seeing more and more that it's a first choice rather than how can I make it work or come after college back to Israel.
It's so interesting. I guess I have a personal interest in this because my son is a senior, so he's applying to colleges right now and trying to figure out what's going to be for next year. And first of all, he wants to make Aliyah. That's like his ultimate goal. And he has applied to schools in the United States. We live in New York. He's applied to some schools here, in on the East Coast, but he really, really wants to go to school in Israel. So that process is going to be starting shortly.
So yeah, you can definitely give him our number and we'll be happy to guide him through it. There's a lot of really, really great options here. And I promise if he's here near us, we'll take great care of him.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate it. I appreciate it. So today we are going to be talking about, on the topic of family, on the topic of taking care of each other. I'm really so honored to have you here today because you're going to be sharing your personal story today about raising a child with a rare illness. Your story is very powerful and very moving, and I know that it's going to bring strength and comfort to so many parents who are going through something similar to you. So I want to start at the beginning. Can you please tell me about your family and how you first learned that your daughter Sarena had Dravet syndrome?
Yes. So our family actually, there's a lot of interesting pieces of hashgacha that play into the evolution of finding out Serena's diagnosis and the care that we had. So we were living in Israel from 2010. My husband and I made Aliyah with our first daughter at the time and lived here happily for 7 years. We had our second daughter and our third daughter here. And in 2017, we were presented the opportunity to work as the JLIC directors in Rutgers University. And at the time when we were told about this opportunity, I'll never forget, I looked at my husband and I said, "Are you crazy? We finally made Aliyah. We're finally settled. We have our kids here. I figured out the supermarkets. Leave me alone. I'm not leaving and coming back again. Enough is enough." And at that point, my parents and his parents had both made Aliyah. So I was like, it's not happening. And for various reasons, we took the plunge and took the opportunity to take the position at Rutgers University through OUJLIC. And when we were there, I found out I was pregnant with our youngest daughter, Sarena, and she was born during our time there at Rutgers, which in itself was an incredible experience, being surrounded by the students at Rutgers and how they kind of became part of our family when she was born, and the beautiful sense of community we felt there. But what was very critical is that where we lived in New Brunswick, New Jersey, was less than a mile away from Robert Wood Johnson Hospital, which is one of the best children's hospitals in the New Jersey area, which I didn't know at the time, and hopefully nobody will need to know. But Sarena was born there, and our fourth daughter, perfectly healthy, Baruch Hashem, everything went great, and we got to name her after my grandmother, Shirley Abel, and her name was Sarah, and it was just perfect. I had my 4 little girls in their 4 matching outfits, and it was just so much fun. I felt like I was playing house times 4. And when Sarena was 7 months old, we were at the Hillel, as we always were on Friday nights. It was a Friday night. It was Shabbat Hagadol, the Shabbat between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. And we were there. My husband was leading the minyan. I was in our office with some students. And Sarena was laying on the floor doing tummy time, and the students were fawning over her. And suddenly I noticed that her eyes were rolling or flickering. And I tried to get her attention, and she wasn't focusing on me. And I picked her up, and I tried, and I could tell she wasn't responding. And then her arm started jerking. And I knew something was wrong. So I looked at my oldest daughter, who was, I think, 10 at the time. And I said, "Dodie, don't be dramatic, but please go inside Shul and get Abba, tell him I need him." Now, we all have a flair for the dramatic, so it was important, but I told her not to be dramatic. And he came out, and he immediately also saw that something wasn't right. And the Hillel building actually was a 5-minute walk from Robert Wood Johnson Hospital. So we made the decision to walk to the hospital only because it was quicker than calling an ambulance.
True.
And thank God there were so many wonderful students there who took the other girls and fed them dinner, and we gave them our key and they took them home. And I had a feeling it was a seizure.
Okay.
But at that time in my life, I had never experienced a seizure in real life. I had seen them in movies, and this didn't look like what I had ever seen before. But something in my gut told me that's what it was. And we got to the emergency room, and they did some tests, and thank God by the time we got there, she was fine. And she returned back to herself, and she was great. But the tests came back showing that there was some irregularities in her EEG, the test that measures the brain waves. That was on Friday night. And by Sunday, we were getting ready to go home. They were releasing us. They said, "She has some irregularities, but we're not so concerned. She needs to take medication, and you can go home." So being the night, maybe I was naive, maybe I was protecting myself, but I was like, okay, like, people have diabetes, people have, lifelong illnesses, they take medication and they're fine. So I was like, okay, she'll take medicine and she'll be fine. Little did I know that she wasn't going to be fine. 2 weeks later was Erev Sukkot, exactly Erev Sukkot. And I always get a little bit of like post-trauma sharing this piece of the journey. My sister and brother-in-law joined us for Chag that year because they were making Aliyah 2 weeks later, so they just came to us instead of making, which is a key point in the story. 40 minutes before candlelighting, I get the girls showered. I start getting them dressed in their new matching outfits that I picked up from Lakewood. And I'm putting Sarena in her little new outfit. Now she's almost 8 months old at this point. And I'm putting her little outfit on her. I'm so excited. And of course, because it's 40 minutes before Yontif, I'm in a one-piece Mr. Potato Head pajama because I'm just running around getting ready and between showering the girls and everything.
Of course.
And it's those little things that stick out. And I start getting Sarena dressed, and suddenly she starts to convulse. And she starts to have a seizure. And she was a little baby, so I was able to move her. And I quickly picked her up and carried her to the bedroom across, which is where my sister and brother-in-law were. My brother-in-law is a medical student and a Hatzalah member. So I brought her there, and there was nothing any of us really could do because at that point we hadn't been given any instructions on what to do if she had another seizure. So we called 911. And from the time the seizure started, 911 came. They injected her with medication, which didn't stop the seizure. And I'm running up and down the hall, changing into something normal because I can't go to the hospital in Mr. Potato Head. And every time I walk back and forth from my sister's bedroom to my bedroom, I'm yelling, she's still seizing. She's still doing it. I can't believe it. And my 2-year-old is yelling, I'm still doing it. I'm still doing it. And to this day, her little voice kind of like stands out as like a comic relief almost in the most intense moments of our lives. And finally, the paramedics said, you know what, we're not able to stop her seizure. We need to get her to the hospital. So at this point, it's 20 minutes before Yontif, maybe even less. We get in the ambulance. Because my sister was there with her husband, my husband, Tzvi, was able to join me to go to the hospital. I didn't have to go alone with her. So we get to the hospital, and as we walk in, it was like a surreal experience. I felt like I was watching something happen to someone else, or I was watching a scene from Grey's Anatomy. I see my baby on a stretcher, seizing, surrounded by doctors, and the head doctor standing at the foot of her bed, calling out, team, push this, push that medication, give her this, give her that. And there's one nurse whose sole responsibility is to write down exactly which medications they were giving her. And there's one nurse whose sole responsibility was to inject the medication. And Tzvi and I are standing there looking at each other like, what is happening? And then eventually one nurse comes up to us and he says, Mom, I just want to let you know, there's a good chance we're going to have to intubate your baby to give her a tube to help her breathe. And I remember looking at him and saying, but it's not an emergency, right? Like my brain couldn't comprehend that the severity of what was happening. Meaning medically, I understood what they were doing, but I just thought it was like preventative. And what I understand now is that when someone's given large doses of anti-seizure medication, it suppresses the nervous system. It causes the body to calm down. But that includes the lungs. And so to protect her lungs, to protect her airway, they had to put a tube in so that they could give her enough medicine to stop the seizure, but still allow her to breathe. That was the single most transformative moment in my life, I would say, as a mother. Just standing there thinking how I would do anything to make it stop. I would do anything, just that feeling of helplessness.
Yeah.
And then they stabilized her, and the story goes on, and Baruch Hashem, once she stabilized, Sukkot was a hard one. Sukkot was a hard one that year. Because we were Israeli, because we were on Shlichut, we were technically only keeping one day.
Right.
One day of Chag. But we weren't doing malacha on the second day because we didn't want to confuse our kids, and we didn't want to confuse the students and Marat Ayin and all these different things. So we were very, very careful not to do malacha. But it happened to be that I had my phone with me in the hospital because we went in before Yom Tov started. And I looked at my husband and I said, when the day is over here, I'm calling my parents in Israel because I can't do this alone. And I called my parents, Motzei Yom Tov. The second Chag ended here, or in New Jersey. There were no nurses in the room or anything, so I made the call, and it was 3:00 in the morning in Israel. And I called my father and I said, Abba, Serena's intubated. What do you mean Serena's intubated? She had a 2-hour seizure. They couldn't stop it. And my father's like, okay, I'm waking up Ima. This was at 3 a.m. By 7 a.m., my parents were on a flight. And they were in the hospital with me before Yom Tov even came out the next day in New Jersey.
Oh, wow.
All this to say that from day one, we've never been alone.
Thank God.
From day one of this journey, we've been supported and we've been cared for. And from that seizure moving forward, we had a process of tests and doctor's appointments and diagnosis, and finally getting her diagnosis of Dravet Syndrome, which took about 6 to 7 months because it requires a genetic test that goes to a lab. And by the time we got the official diagnosis, it took that amount of time.
Wow. And so, okay, so she has Dravet syndrome. I'm just going to spell it just for people who are listening. Dravet, Dravet syndrome. Can you tell us a little bit more about what it is or what the symptoms are? Like, what does it look like?
Yes. So Dravet syndrome is a rare form of genetic epilepsy. Genetic meaning it comes from a genetic mutation, not necessarily hereditary. It doesn't necessarily come from a parent to a child.
Okay.
And that's important because 80% of people with Dravet syndrome, it actually is not inherited. It's a random mutation that takes place. So people don't have to be like, why is this not tested for? I just want to make that clear. It's not something that would be tested for because it doesn't, in most cases, it doesn't come from parents. And even if it does, it only requires one parent to have the mutation. But what Dravet syndrome essentially is it's a severe form of epilepsy, which develops very young, prior to age 1, usually the onset of seizures, which is the first red flag that the neurologist noticed, that her seizure was at such a young age, her first seizure, because it is not uncommon for children to have febrile seizures, and it usually doesn't lead to extensive testing and concern if it's beyond age 1. But because she was so little, he immediately went to do an EEG and to do further testing on her. So it starts at an early age. The seizures are usually very long, very hard to stop, and hard to get under control, hard to get like a balance of the medications. In addition to severe seizures, there's also a wide spectrum of developmental delay, cognitive delay, motor, speech, the full spectrum of delays. And many children with Dravet syndrome also are on the autistic spectrum.
Okay.
So you're talking about a much more complex disease than regular epilepsy.
Right. Right. Yeah, and it's scary. Like from your point of view, from a perspective, it's very, very scary. Must
It's
be.
extremely scary because it's extremely unpredictable.
You never know when it's gonna start, when she could be anywhere and have a seizure.
Anywhere without any trigger, without any warning. And that is the single most scary part about what she has, because there's nothing I can do to prevent it. There's nothing I can do to expect it. And so it requires 24/7 supervision. She can never be left alone, morning, night, sleeping, eating. She can never be left unattended.
So does she sleep in your room?
Often.
Okay.
She does not. She has her own room, and we have a video monitor on her with a heart monitor that checks her oxygen and heart rate that alerts us to changes.
Very
So
smart.
she's fully monitored at night, and we actually also have a seizure alert dog who
Wow.
is trained to detect changes in Serena's electrical chemistry that she can smell those changes, and she barks if she senses a change.
I didn't even know I know the dogs are trained to help people, but I didn't know that they were specifically trained with seizures. That's actually really interesting.
Yeah, it's fascinating, and it's one of the most difficult types of training for a dog to have. And even now, her name is Rosie, the dog. We've had her for 2 years, and she's still learning. She's still learning Serena's changes. And because of the type of seizures that Sarena has, that's another thing with Dravet, is it presents with all seizure types. And that's, the typical what people have seen in movies, convulsive, full body shaking.
Yeah.
It's the absent seizure where she just stares off. It's minor body jerks. It's every type of seizure. And so in addition to us having to learn those different types of seizures, Rosie also has to learn. And so it's very hard type of training, but once we can rely on her, it will be a really great extra tool. Because, for example, now if I'm home alone with Sarena and I need to use the bathroom, either she comes with me or I wait till someone comes home.
Right. Wow. That's hard. So that's gonna lead me to my next question. I mean, like from your perspective as a mom, even from what you just described, I mean, how has Serena's condition affected you personally and also your family?
So I'll start with me personally.
Mhm.
I would say in some ways, I'm a very different person. And in some ways, I'm very much the same. And it's taken work to get there. Living in constant fear is very draining. It's exhausting. And
Yes.
it's terrifying to be in constant fear of not just where will we be when she has a seizure? Will I be able to pick her up? Is it going to draw attention? The more external things, but the fear of how is this seizure going to end?
Right.
And not even verbalizing the
Of course.
the real fear that I live with on a constant basis, that takes its toll on a person. And so from that perspective, I've become someone, I would say, who, living in constant crisis mode, you can look at that as a negative, but you can also look at it as an extreme positive. We are a family who we take advantage of whatever free moments we have. So if one year we couldn't do Purim because Sarena had a seizure as we were getting into our costumes, so we did a blowout Yom HaAtzmaut party in our house just for the 6 of us because we could. And, homework takes a back seat, because if Serena's okay and we're home and we're playing a game and we're having fun as a normal family, then the math book's going to have to wait. It doesn't mean we get a free pass for everything, but it's definitely given us as a family and me as an individual broader sense of our priorities. And it's helped me really understand that it's okay to let go because you have to let go.
Right. It offers you a different perspective. Like you're operating from a different mindset, a different perspective. You're appreciating more. Like I can even see in your description, you're appreciating everything so much more. Even the mundane moments that many of us take for granted, preparing dinner, playing a game, doing homework, bath time, like even a family outing, like that those moments are just so much more precious for you now. And you appreciate them more.
100%. And as an individual, it was very hard for me to take help from other people.
Mm-hmm.
It was very hard for me. I, Baruch Hashem, was very lucky to be raised in a family of incredible people who were constantly doing chesed for others, who had an open home constantly. I don't ever remember a Shabbos table where we didn't have guests. And that goes back to my grandparents even. And I found that to be the norm, to be on the giving end. Baruch Hashem, my whole life, that's how I was raised. I didn't even look at it like I was doing anything good. It was just it was just life. That's how you function. And suddenly to be on this other side of needing help was very, very challenging for me. And one of the biggest chasadim that someone did for me during this time period. Now, I'll remind you, we were living in Rutgers. We were living in New Brunswick at the time.
Yes.
And all of our family was in Israel. And we don't really have any immediate family in the East Coast at all. I'm from Chicago and my husband's from Toronto.
Oh, wow.
So we were really alone there. And my sister-in-law's mother, who lives in San Diego, called me up in the early stages of Sarena's seizures, when she was having seizures on a weekly basis, and we were in the hospital for 3 to 4 days at a time, and really, 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 really in full-on crisis mode. And she called me and she said, Tali, you need help, whatever. Do you want me to call Chai Lifeline for you? Because people had mentioned Chai Lifeline, and I kept saying, no, I don't need it. We're fine. We're fine. It's not for us. We're the ones who do that. We don't take that.
Right.
And she calls me up and she said, Tali, is it okay if I call for you?
Smart.
And I'll never forget, I burst into tears. And I said, I think so. And that one small chesed that she did of picking up a phone, taking the initiative, just doing, really, first of all, saved us.
Yes.
But also gave me huge perspective on how to be there for others. And this whole journey with Sarena has given me so much perspective on how to truly be there for other people in their times of need.
That's huge though, because it's so interesting. What you mentioned. Yes, she picked up the phone and she called High Lifeline. They, your mother-in-law, your sister-in-law's mother didn't come like and physically do anything, and it wasn't a big grandiose thing. But just the fact that she thought of you, and then she said this particular act that I can do would really help Tali. So like I just want to stress, like it doesn't have to be this big grandiose thing that something does. Sometimes even the teeniest, tiniest things, the thinking of somebody and doing something small for them could really give such a result that it is really life-saving.
Yeah, and I want to emphasize that it's also recognizing what does the other person need from me?
Yes.
Not what's going to make me feel good as the person doing the chesed.
Yes.
But what does this person need from me? And I've learned along the way, and I I truly believe that everyone has the best intentions, but there's a very big difference between a text message that says, "How are you?" versus "I'm thinking of you."
I agree.
Because "How are you?" while they both have the same intention, and I don't fault anyone, and I do it all the time also, but "How are you?" puts the responsibility back on me to then respond. And maybe I don't have the time Maybe I don't have the energy. Maybe I don't have the words to tell you how I am.
Yes.
And when you say, I'm thinking of you, it allows me to, A, know that you're thinking of me. And it gives me the opportunity to share as much or as little as I want. It gives me the opportunity to maybe send back a little heart emoji, maybe to send a little picture or video of Sarena, maybe to send nothing at all at that moment in that time, but to really just feel that embrace that someone's sending. And so I've really learned a lot in terms of recognizing what this person needs from me and the way in which people have done chesed for us, how I've so appreciated those who took the time to really see what we needed and when.
I love that you said that because it's true. You know, a lot of times when we give Hesed, it's like, what's easiest for us? So I can do this, I can do this now. But it's not always taking into account what the other person really, really, really needs. And that takes thought. You really have to stop and put yourself in the other person's shoes for a minute. And yeah, that's really, really powerful. So and I'm wondering, like how did your husband and your other kids, how do they react to the situation? How are they, going through this?
Yeah. So I like to say that we are more than a family, we're a team.
Okay.
We are fiercely protective of each other. And I mean that also of my children to each other and us to our children and me and my husband even towards each other. We've really become a team. Like we view ourselves as like team Wogi, the Wogi girls, everyone kind of like, we've gotten that like persona, the girl gang. And in one way, we've kind of formed this like intense insular bond where like we view every action, every success and failure, every, like we of any of the girls, but specifically of Sarena, it's all of our successes. When Sarena started walking, you would think that my girls received a box of American Girl dolls drop shipped at the house, one for each of them, the way that they were celebrating watching her first steps.
Wow.
And the way that they encourage her and the way that they are so proud of her, but also the way that they treat her like a regular sister is so fascinating to see and makes me so proud because I try not to treat her differently, but of course that's impossible because I have this constant monster in my head of fear of what's going to happen and when's going to happen and how and the fear of losing her is so intense inside of me at all times that it's hard not to treat her differently. But as a mother of 3 other children, I really do try to do my best. I don't know if my best is good enough, but it's all I can do. But the other girls, they kind of very much are similar in they love her so much and they're so proud of her, but they also fight with her and they get annoyed with her and they really and I love to see it. And they really treat her like one of the gang. And in terms of my husband, like we've become such a partnership in terms of the way we parent. We always were, but it's become so much more pronounced now where and I don't take this for granted for 1 second because I don't think it's like this in every situation and I know that it has waves, but the way that we're able to compensate for each other's strengths and weaknesses to make the house function. I just say function. I don't even mean be clean or neat or anything above average, but just to be functional as a family, the way that we compensate for each other. And Tzvi knows I don't sleep at night because I'm constantly watching the monitor and I'm constantly checking on Sarena and I don't have it in me to close my eyes and just for fear of what's going to happen when I open them.
Right.
And because I don't sleep at night, I eventually have to sleep. And so I don't do the mornings.
Okay.
I just can't. I only start to doze off as the sun is coming up because I feel safe. I know Tzvi's going to wake up soon. The girls are going to wake up soon and they'll have more eyes on Sarena. And so that's just my body kind of protecting me, I guess. And so he always does the mornings. Always. Now, let's be honest, I was never a morning person, but this kind of has exaggerated it tenfold. And just the way that we're able to really play off each other's strengths and weaknesses. And I'm like Serena's full-on medical director. And he doesn't have to worry about, refilling the medications. Not that he doesn't, not that he's not responsible for it, but it's kind of like I've taken on that role. So he's taken on other roles, and we really have found a great balance in terms of how to compensate.
Yeah, it's so beautiful. Like it's just I want to recognize that for a minute. Like it's so beautiful that you and your husband, you're working together in tandem. You're working together as a team. You're coming together. It's a unification. Your whole family also. And I just want to say it's so beautiful to see that because that's not the case in some families. Some families it's the opposite, unfortunately. So I just really want to recognize that for you. And I'm like, sitting here listening to your story, I'm so happy for you that this is the case for you because it just makes everybody grow and thrive when you're bonding together, when you're coming together, when you're a team, when you're unified for a purpose. I think it's really beautiful.
Yeah, for sure. And I don't take it for granted, but I will add, we are not a two-parent household. We're a six-parent household because my parents are much more than grandparents to my kids, and my in-laws are much more than grandparents to my kids because because of everything we've been going through and are going through with Sarena, it has taken its toll on the other girls. And just like every child needs their own individual attention, a child who has a sibling with special needs, they're getting, I think, so much less attention that they almost need more of it to compensate. And for that reason, I'm so grateful to my parents, my siblings, my in-laws, because they've all taken part in this unit that we've become. We would not be able to do the work that we do, live the life that we do, function at all in any way without their support and their help. So it's just it's a really much a group effort.
That is really special. That is really special. I love that. Like I just it's so warm and it's so inspirational. That's like what we should strive for. We're like more unity, more togetherness, bringing in extended family to help, like welcoming and getting all the help that we can get. So that you could live like you could feel human, you could feel human.
Yeah. Yeah. And you know what? It's so funny that you say that because like my baseline is just to try to feel human.
Yeah.
And don't get me wrong, there are days where that doesn't happen. There are days where I just can't human today. I just can't get out of bed. And it's too scary, it's too hard, it's too much. And there are those days. And when those days come, it's okay to take those days as long as you don't get sucked into that.
Right.
And, you know, again, just reiterating, my parents and my sisters and my brother and sister-in-law, like they help me get out of those days when I get there. They know how to allow me to be in those moments, but not at risk of falling too deeply into that fear and that hole.
Yes.
So that's something that I'm also learning to navigate. It's been 4 years since she started having seizures. She's almost 6, so 4.5 years. And no, 5 years. And it varies from day to day, from hour to hour.
Right. I can imagine that. And I have an interesting question to ask you because you're a Rebbetzin also. So I feel like there's a part of God, there's a God perspective that we can bring into this picture, to maybe share with other families. Because there are so many other families that are going through something similar. Maybe their child doesn't have Dravet syndrome, but maybe they have cancer or cerebral palsy or autism, or they're just like mentally disabled or physically disabled or paralyzed. I mean, there's so many different scenarios, but it's all the same principle of like parenting a child with special needs who needs care 24/7. And I would just love to bring in the God picture. And I just wanted to see from your perspective as a Rebbetzin how that fits in for you.
Yeah. So it's a really interesting question. I get asked often, this question, where does God fit into all of this? And am I angry at God? And do I struggle with my emunah? And I've come to the conclusion that maybe my answer is the lazy way out, but it's much easier to have emunah for me than to not. And what I mean by that is, let's say I was angry at Hashem. Let's say I didn't believe in him anymore. I said, how could there be a being in this world who gave me this child and I don't believe in it and whatever? So then what? So then I'm stuck dealing with this by myself. So there's no cure, and there's not medication that controls her seizures. Despite being on 5 medications, she's still having seizures. And there's not therapy that's helping her. And there's not, so what? I just have to deal with it. Whereas having emunah, it's much easier to say, okay, you know what? Someone else is in charge. And being able to just say, whatever happens, happens. And it's in Hashem's hands, and Hashem has us in his hands. Maybe it's the lazy way out. I don't know. I kind of laugh at myself when I say that, but I genuinely mean it. That believing is so much easier than not believing, because not believing in Hashem is way scarier, in my opinion.
I agree.
And I have a favorite pasuk that I kind of have gone back to over and over throughout this journey. Hazorim bedima, berina yiktoru. When we plant with tears, we will reap with joy. And first of all, Serena's name is Sarena. And I truly believe that it's those tears, the tears of a mother, of a father, of emunah in general. Without those tears, without that belief that we're going to grow something from it, those tears are for nothing. But when we plant a field, when we water it and we allow it to grow, and anyone who's worked in a garden knows there's a lot of emunah involved in gardening. Whether you're atheist or orthodox or not, or what, you plant this little seed in the garden, you put some water in it, and you're telling me it turns into a flower by magic. There's a lot of emunah there. And as parents, and this is to parents of any type of child, with special needs, without special needs, every child has needs. Every child has tears that are planted for them. And those tears are not wasted. The work and the effort and the love and the fear that we put into raising our children, to know that's doing something, that's what gives me the strength. And the fact that her name is Rena, Sarena, that pasuk is very personal to me, because I'm planting a lot of tears for this kid.
Yeah.
A lot of tears, and Berina Yiksoru, with joy. We will reap them with joy. And I truly have so much joy raising her.
It's so beautiful.
And her sisters. And to get to do that in Eretz Yisrael, to get to do that surrounded by family, surrounded by people that love us, and just to feel that joy. I'll feel a lot more joy when there's a cure.
Of course.
You're all invited to the Sudat Hoda when the cure is developed very soon, Bezrat Hashem. We have the theme already planned, and the menu and the color scheme. That party is going to be amazing.
Yes.
But that joy of raising her and her sisters, really, it's not taken for granted.
Right. And so along those lines, what has been the biggest blessing of raising Sarena?
Oh my gosh. She's just a really, really, really fun kid. She's just a happy child. And she really is, she's Rena. She's a song. Her name is her. Sarah is a princess. Rena is a song. And that's what she is. She walks around with a crown all day on her head, singing Frozen songs, and she's pure joy. And she's frustrating too, and she's a kid, and she makes a mess, and she doesn't listen. But the biggest bracha in all this, I would say, is the perspective it's given me, and the sense of self in our family as a unit. both our immediate unit and our extended unit. It's changed all of us. And I really think for the better. Not that I would choose this, but if we already have it,
Right.
it has given us a lot of koach in our family.
Right. And it has brought you all closer together.
Oh, for sure. I mean, we were crazy close before, but now we're just, you can't tell who's who or what's what. It's Baruch Hashem. It's great.
I think it's so beautiful. We have time for one more question. I mean, as I mentioned earlier, there's so many families that are facing the challenges of raising a child with cancer, cerebral palsy, all these other illnesses that leave children with physical, emotional, and mental handicaps. And I know that you shared, you shared the ways that you and your family were handling it. And I was just wondering if maybe you had some last words of strength and wisdom to help empower moms and dads all over the world so that they can stay positive and continue with the difficult blessings that they have of raising their special needs kids. Because everybody's in a different situation. I mean, you are so lucky to have family together. Not everybody does, for whatever reason, for all different kinds of reasons. Not everybody, lives near a hospital. Not everybody has the resources, and just, not everybody is savvy enough to know what to do. And I'm not saying that in a bad way. Like, you just don't know what to do when you're facing this situation. Like genuinely speaking. And my goal today was just to share your story, and also to really, really help empower people, to let them know they're not alone, and just to give them something to hold on to, some words of wisdom, some like nuggets of strength.
Yeah. Two things. So first of all, something that I had to learn and I'm still learning is ask for help. Whether it's literal help, physical help, or just emotional, or someone to talk to, or just an escape for a cup of coffee, ask. Also, I hope you'll share my contact information at the end of this with anyone who wants to reach out. If I can guide anyone in any way, that I'm an open door. But ask for help, whether it's from organizations, peers, your school, the school that your children go to, whatever it is. People want to help, they just don't know. And so I think we need to ask. That's number one. 1B, I guess, because it's is don't lie to yourself. It's okay to be scared. It's okay to be scared, and it's okay to be honest with yourself about that, which transitions me into my next piece of advice, which is there is a book that has transformed the way that I relate to Serena's situation, which is Living in the Presence by Rabbi Dr. Benjamin Epstein. It's a book about Yishuv Hadat, about living in the present moment, but not in the sense of making the moment what I want. Rather, this is the moment I'm in. How can I be in this moment? And not focus on what was, and not focus on what will be. Because at the beginning of this journey, there was a lot of what was and a lot of what will be.
Yes.
Picturing that seizure, picturing her intubated, and going back to those moments, it's prohibitive. You can't, how does a parent move forward from that?
Right.
And then the looking forward, the immediate future of when will the seizure be and how will it happen, or even the more further future of bat mitzvah and driving and wedding. And no, don't go there. Live in the present. Look at Sarena right now. Right now, she's okay. Right now, she's in her bed, in her matching PJs to her sister, comfy, cozy, and she's okay. And that's what I need to look at. And so either read the book, or I believe there's a podcast also that he discusses it on, but find a way to live in the present moment. And that's not easy, trust me. But that is something that has transformed the way I relate to all my kids, and specifically Sarena, because of the unpredictability of her seizures and of her life. I've really had to just separate the past and the future and just be in the here and now.
Beautiful. Thank you. That's perfect. Thank you. Thank you so much, Rebbetzin Tali, for joining us on America's Top Rebbetzins. It was really, really a pleasure to have you with us. And in the merit of this class, may Hashem protect all the Jewish people across the world, especially the IDF soldiers, including Yosef Aaron ben Hava Kela, Yuval Baruch ben Dina Batsheva, Yehuda ben Rivka Ravital, and Yehuda Eliezer ben Geula Ahuva. Thank you so, so much again.
Thank you.